webinar. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're looking at how expats can transfer social insurance benefits when they're living and working abroad. As ever, when we're talking about expats, we're talking about UK expats living and working abroad, or expats relocating to the UK. So different criteria and different circumstance that fit in with different people. And bear that in mind when we're talking by subscribing to our website and the YouTube stream for living and working abroad. It's even more complicated because today we're talking about the social insurance agreement, and this is essentially an EU agreement, but it's not just the EU, it's the EEA, and the EEA includes countries like Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. But post-Brexit, then, from the UK perspective, it includes additional countries that are peculiar to social insurance exchange and benefits with the UK. So we're looking at all those different arrangements, and that added country for UK expats abroad could be places like Channel Islands or Ireland, close to the UK, but it can also mean places like Canada and Barbados further ashore. So for more information and guidance, follow the series on our YouTube channel and contact us at ProACTPartnership.com for more information and guidance. We're looking at three things today on transferring benefits. We can transfer healthcare benefits, we can transfer allowances, and we can transfer pensions. So let's have a look at what those are. When we're talking about transferring allowances, it's related to healthcare as well. So the type of allowances that we can transfer vary depending upon the circumstance. It's what's defined as exportable benefits. Some benefits aren't exportable, and so if you leave the UK, you lose your entitlement to those benefits. Others are exportable, in which case you could carry those with you when you go abroad and transfer them overseas. When you are overseas as a UK expat, you're limited about your access to the NHS under certain conditions. So these are the things that we're going to look at later as we go through the different rules and requirements. When you're transferring benefits abroad, in terms of healthcare and allowances, it's done through a form called an S1. However, there's a second form which is less well known. It's called an S2. An S2 is for an expat that's living and working abroad within the EU EEA social insurance scheme that wants to have a pre-approval for a medical treatment in another jurisdiction. So it's not medical treatment in the country where you live, it's medical treatment in another country. So that planned treatment in that other jurisdiction might be because you're living and working abroad on a temporary basis or permanent basis, but whatever it is, it might be that treatment is only available in that other jurisdiction. So there's a flexibility for a UK expat to get treatment in another country, but you'd use an S2 for that. And similarly, but the social insurance scheme for the EEA countries, the same rules apply, whether you're talking about an S2 form or an S1. The other form that comes up with transferring benefits is a provisional certificate. Now, what the PRC, the provisional certificate, does is it transfers your health and allowances across border to another qualifying country on a temporary basis, on the basis that you haven't got a certificate or a health card. So there's the European health card or the British health card, which allows for transfer of benefits overseas. If you haven't got one of those and you need of treatment, the provisional certificate gives you that temporary treatment until you can get your paperwork in order, and allows for that treatment to take place if it's an accident or emergency overseas. The main form for transferring healthcare benefits overseas is the S1, and the S1 works to transfer healthcare benefits and allowances overseas. Now, the benefits that are transferred, the social insurance healthcare benefits are exportable, include a bereavement allowance and support, maternity leave, war pensions, and support payments for people that are working abroad temporarily. The S1 it can be paid to anyone who's got a state pension from that country, or if they're being sent to work abroad on a short-term basis. So if their employer is saying go and work abroad um, uh, for 1 or 2 years, an S1 transfers the healthcare benefits on that short-term benefit basis without there needing to be a local registration to get entitlement to those benefits. The non-exportable benefits, though, so if you're a UK expat and you're considering going to live and work abroad, if you're in receipt of disability living allowance, a personal independence payment, a carer's allowance, an attendance allowance, after the 1st of January 21, the Brexit period, those allowances will not transfer with you using an S1. So if you're entitled to those benefits while you're in the UK or your EU country, the equivalents, those allowances don't transfer across border with the S1. So you need to look, depending on your country of residence, that are issuing the S1, what allowances and what social insurance benefits will they transfer? And it is a limited section. So for the UK, there will not, you can't export or transfer disability living allowance, personal independence payments, care allowance, or attendance allowance after the 1st of January 21. But bereavement support allowances and widow's pension will continue to be paid, as would maternity leave, war pensions, and certain types of support income payments that are being paid. You take the S1, you take it to your new country, you register it there, and that then gives you access to the social insurance system in that country and the healthcare benefits. The child benefits are not necessarily covered under the S1, but they are a form of allowance. A child benefit, obviously, you have to qualify for the child benefit anyway. And essentially, the issue is that you only qualify for child benefit in the country which is your main home, and you've got a right to live. So if you're in the UK and you haven't got a right to live in the UK, then you can't claim child benefit. But once you've got leave to remain or indefinite leave to remain or settled status as an EU expat, that will give you entitlement to child benefit. If you're going to work abroad on a short-term basis, so short stay trips up to 12 weeks, child benefit will still be paid. So it's not affected by a 3-month working abroad or an 8-week trip abroad. But longer than that, you may no longer qualify for your child benefit allowance. It's not transferable. You need to consider your new country or whether you're entitled to that child benefit allowance. So moving on to the next stage. With the NHS, UK expats qualify for the NHS while they're resident in the UK. If somebody legally comes to live in the UK and they have settled status or permanent residence, then they qualify for the NHS, and that gives them the right to treatment in the NHS. An EU expat relocating and living in the UK, if they bring the European health card with them, or the provisional certificate or an S2, then they too can get treated on the NHS. Okay. But if you're a UK expat, you're living and working abroad, you might take the UK equivalent, uh, uh, the Great Britain health insurance card, take that with you. That will give you the treatment abroad. But when you come back to the UK, you're not entitled to NHS treatment. So once an S1 is issued, you're declaring yourself to be outside the UK, and therefore you're not qualified for the NHS. There are some exceptions, though. If you're a UK expat living and working abroad, and you're in receipt of a UK war pension or a UK government employee, that would include military, civil servants, or you're a UK expat who's living in the EU as a official resident, you've got your resident permit in the EU before the 31st of December 2020, and you've got a UK issued S1 that's registered in that country, then you're still entitled to NHS treatment back in the UK. I'll repeat that again. If you're a UK expat living in the EU and your residency permit in the EU country date is dated before the 31st of December 2020, and you've got a UK issued S1, then that entitles you still to get NHS cover when you're in the UK. Otherwise, you need an EHIC card issued by your country. I'm calling it an EHIC card in terms of EU, but under the social insurance agreements with the UK, the non-EU countries, the non-EEA countries, will have their equivalent of the health card for that travel period. Okay, so what we've covered so far is that we've covered that transferable benefits for healthcare and for pensions and for allowances. What we've covered so far is transferable benefits for healthcare and allowances on a permanent basis, but there's also a temporary basis. And this is where we've been referencing the EHIC cards. Now, these are a driving license size card that a citizen of a country is entitled to. And once they've got that gives them access to health services in that other country. So it's not travel insurance, doesn't cover you for airport travel loss. It doesn't cover you for repatriation, which is an issue. If you die abroad, how does your body get back? That's an instance where you need private medical cover because your S1 or your EHIC or health card is not going to cover that. But for people on short trips or multi-trips, living and working abroad, or even extended stays, if your tax resident and your permanent home remains in one country, the health insurance cards give you the cover to use the health cover in that other country. So let's have a look at the differences between the different countries. And again, we're primarily focusing on EU, EEA countries and the UK, but the UK has got its different arrangements and with other countries, and those countries apply the same sort of principles under the social insurance agreement. So for Portugal, any citizen or legal resident of Portugal is entitled to the health cover there. And if you're entitled to the health cover, you can then apply for the EHIC card. But to get the EHIC card in any European or EEA country, it depends upon what the individual rules are. So if you look at Spain, you have and France, you have to be resident in the country and paying into the social insurance scheme to qualify for an EHIC card. Okay, so within the European Union, if you're covered under the state social insurance system for that particular country, you can qualify to get the health insurance card as a resident of that country to go abroad. So for Portugal, if you're resident, you're going to qualify. But for Spain and France, you actually have to be paying in and contributing into the social insurance system to qualify for the HIC card. Let's have a look at the qualification for the health insurance card in Cyprus. In Cyprus, there is a free health service available to Cyprus citizens and permanent residents. Okay, so to qualify for the health insurance card for when you travel out of Cyprus, when you're Cyprus tax resident, you have to be contributing into the social insurance system as an employee, as a sole trader. You could be also you could be a permanent resident. So if you've been resident in the country for more than 5 years and you qualify for permanent resident status, that gives you the equivalent citizens' rights. So a citizen is entitled of Cyprus is entitled to a health card issued by Cyprus, or a permanent resident is. The other option is to have an S1 card. If you've got an S1 card, you can potentially get an health card issued as well. So for expats living and working abroad in Cyprus, if you're on a temporary residence permit, then you don't automatically qualify for the health insurance card for when you go back to the UK. You have to be paying into the social insurance system as an employee or sole trader to be able to do that. So the scenario there is pre-Brexit. A UK expat would get a 5-year permit, or an EU expat in Cyprus would get a 5-year residency permit. But post-Brexit, non-EU citizens, including the UK, get an annual visa. This is the same in Spain and Portugal, which has to be renewed each year or two and verified at that point. And so those people are in a different scenario. Once you get to 5 years, you can get a permanent residency, which is the equivalent of being treated like a citizen. The citizenship gives you the passport as well, and less conditions than the permanent residency. So there's an added value there as well. The permanent residents and the citizens automatically qualify for the health insurance card without having to pay and contribute into the social insurance system. So European health cards are available when you're eligible for the social insurance system of the EU country in which you live. Some countries, that is, like Portugal, that's based upon that you're legally resident in the country, similarly with the UK. But with other countries like Spain and France and Cyprus, you have to be contributing into the social insurance system to qualify for the healthcare system as well. Let's go and look at the healthcare system for the UK. Now, the interesting thing about the healthcare system for the UK is that they changed the name. It's called the GHIC. It was going to be the GBHIC. They just decided to make it really difficult for me. The GHIC, the Great Britain Health Insurance Card, is equivalent to the European one. But the distinct thing is that before the EU, with an EHIC card, that works throughout the EEA. So it works in Norway, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, as well as the EU countries. So for any EU expat going around the EEA, the EHIC card provides healthcare when they're in that country. With the UK version of the health card, the British health card only works in the EU countries. It doesn't work in the Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. So it doesn't work in the EEA countries. It does work in the countries where the UK have got their own version of the social insurance agreement. So that includes countries like Turkey, Canada, USA, Channel Islands, and Isle of Man, the reciprocal social insurance agreement, the GB health card works in those countries and in the EU countries, but not in the EEA countries for the 4 countries. So it's something to bear in mind. And that makes an essential difference. But to qualify for that health card from the UK, you need to be legally resident. You need to have a settled status, or you need to have a indefinite leave to remain status to qualify for that health card in the UK. Okay. So we've covered so far that under health insurance rules, you can transfer healthcare and allowances, and we've covered the options on what that is. The other big allowance that you can transfer over is your pensions. And again, your state pension entitlement varied a lot after Brexit, complicated by the fact that the UK are in the process of bringing in a new state pension as opposed to the old basic state pension, which was enhanced with additional contributions. That system was chopped and changed and effectively set up to be abandoned, which now happens to the 31st of July this year. So anybody that wants to contribute and make sure that they've got the maximum UK state pension that's available, they need to contact us at proactpartnership.com and read watch the Living and Working Abroad programs that we've got in this series on that to maximise your qualify for your UK state pension. To get a state pension in the UK, from the UK, you've got to have been living and working in the UK for a significant period of time. So it's not just for UK citizens. If you're an expat that's lived and worked in the UK for a period of time, you qualify for a state pension as long as you've got the qualifying years. So if you're an expat, you've got to have been in the UK for a certain period of time. Then you have to have contributed for long enough into the system. Now, the minimum is 10 years, but actually you can use that 10 years can be within the entitlement of the whole of the social insurance agreement. So if an expat, British expat has only got 5 years in the UK, they can still qualify for 5 years of UK state pension based upon the fact that they've worked for 20 years in another jurisdiction under the same scheme, the same mutual scheme. EEA countries, Switzerland, Gibraltar, Canada, USA, Turkey, for example. Just note on Gibraltar is a British Overseas Territory. Not in the EU, but it kind of is in the EU. So the border controls and the freedom of movement is covered under a Spanish agreement, although it's technically an independent border. So freedom of movement for EU citizens, but a British person should also have freedom of movement, but because of the border-free area into the EU, passports are checked when you enter Gibraltar. So if you've got 10 years, you can get that state pension. Now, we've said that if you've got less than 10 years, then you can use your contributions from another country. Now, you can combine your benefits from different countries or to claim into one country. So if you've got 5 years in the UK and you go back home and you're living and working in Poland when you retire, you could add to your Polish state pension the 5 years from the UK contribution. If you're a UK expat that's worked in the UK for 20 years, then going abroad, you could continue to contribute into the UK scheme to build yourself up to the maximum UK state pension of 35 years. Or when you get to retire in your other country, you can use that country's state system to use your credits from the UK and transfer those over to get your state pension in the second country. The other option you've got post-Brexit for UK expats is it could claim a smaller UK state pension and a smaller overseas state pension from Cyprus, for example. So for more information and guidance on that, contact us at proactpartnership.com, and we will go into that in more detail, that state pension benefits. We've done some live living and working abroad webinars on that. If you look at our series and register and stay in charge, but we're going to look at that again in a couple of weeks, where we go into more detail about how those state pensions work. So post-Brexit, UK expats could have two state pensions, or you can maximise that. So some countries will pay a better state pension than another country, or higher. You need to make your value and make your judgments. The English system is what it is. If you're short on your years, when you leave the UK, you can enhance your contributions, and you can keep paying into the system. But you can then transfer those credits towards your state pension between the countries when you come to claim that benefit. So for more information, guidance, working that one out and enhancing your state pension benefits, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Thanks a lot for listening. As ever, I do like to go on, and I hope you found it interesting and informative, and follow the series for more information and guidance. Contact us online, subscribe to the Living and Working Abroad channel, and don't forget we offer an annual tax return service available online. You can subscribe online, and that gives you access to consultant reviews, tax preparation, tax return, and all your advice throughout the year from £1 a day. So for more information and guidance on our annual tax return service, to submit your returns, contact us at proactpartnership.com, or go to our site to subscribe online at proactpartnership.co.uk. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you next time.